Hey everyone, in this video we will be creating the functionality for users to leave reviews for properties. So let's get started. So the first thing that we're going to do is create a new model, and we're going to call it review. First specify the package, then import GORM and create your structure and include these different fields within that structure. With that done, we are going to go into our property model and add in review. So underneath apartments is where I will create reviews, and we'll add in the JSON, which will just say reviews. And above apartments, I'm going to create a new field called stars to represent how many stars the property has. Now let's go into our database file and modify the migrations. So we're going to want it to look like this instead. All right, with that done, let's go into our property routes and modify some of our functions. So within this file, we have a function called get property and apartments by property ID. Let's go modify this. So we want to say get property and associations. And we want to preload the apartments and the reviews for the property. So one way that we can do that is by saying preload reviews. Or if we want to get all of the associations with the property, we can just preload clause.associations. And we need to import that from GORM. And it looks like it auto-imported for us, so let's go check that out. So now anywhere that we were using the prior function name, let's go change it. And let's also look for anywhere we're using preload. So here's another example. Let's just specify we want clause.associations. And here is another example. With that done, let's go into apartments and see if we're using it in there. And it looks like we are. So let's change this to get property and associations by property ID. Now let's go and create the routes for creating a review. So within our routes folder, let's create review. Let's specify the package as routes. Let's create the create review function and import iris. So let's create the data structure for the request body of this function. Now within the create review function, we need to get the ID for the property, which will be a URL parameter. And then we will get the property and its associations using that ID. And if property is nil, then we will return. Otherwise, we need to check and make sure the request body is valid JSON. And if we get an error, that means that we need to handle validation errors and return. If not, we need to convert this string ID into a uint. And if we get an error during that conversion, we need to create an internal server error and send that to the user. Otherwise, we'll create a review and then store that in our database. And after that, we will update the property stars, passing in the review and the property. And then we will send the review to the user. Now let's create the update property stars function. We'll expect it to take in a properties pointer and a float. And within it, we'll declare a variable average, and we'll get how many reviews the property has. And if the review's length is equal to 0, that means that this is the first review for the property. So the average is just going to be equal to the passed in stars. Otherwise, we need to loop through each property, and we need to get the sum for all of the stars of the reviews, and then we need to divide that by the reviews length plus 1, and we also need to add the passed in stars to the sum, and that is going to give us our average. Now down here at the end, we'll just round off the average to 1 decimal place, and then we will update the property with the new stars amount. So with that done, let's add all of these imports. So we're going to need utils, string conver, models, storage, and math. And with that done, let's go into main.go. And here we need to create a new party for reviews. So we will do that underneath apartment. With that done, let's start up our server. With your server started, head to your application code. Here I am in my constants file, and I'm going to add the endpoint that we just created. So I'll start off by creating a variable called review. Then I'll create the review endpoint. And finally, I'll create the create review endpoint. So with that done, let's go create a new screen for reviews. Let's first export our component, and we're going to expect the route to have parameters of property ID and property name. And within our component, we are going to return a keyboard aware scroll view, screen, a modal header depending on the platform, and then a view. So let's add all of these different imports, and that's not from React, so let's just add view first. And down below the component, let's create our styles. And within it, let's create these styles for container. All right, with that done, let's go to our index file. And within this stack for modals, we're going to add that new screen. So let's add that stack screen. We'll give it a name of review, and header shown is false. Now let's go to our types file and add in review. Here beneath manage units is where we will create the types for review. Now let's go to the review section so that we can navigate to this screen. So within this section, let's get the navigation variable, and let's import use navigation. And now here for this button where we are logging, navigate to the review screen, let's actually navigate now. So here we will specify we need to navigate to the review screen. The property ID is going to be equal to the property ID. And if there's a property name, that will be the property name. Otherwise, we will just pass in the street, state, and zip. And let's import this function. And that should be all good. So now we can navigate to that screen within our application. So let's go look for a new property, and this one will work. And down here at the review section, let's press write a review, and here is the review screen. So let's get started in building this screen out. So I'm going to navigate to that screen within my code and get started. So in getting started, I'm going to add in some different imports that we're going to need to use. Now that's going to be all of these different components from UIKitten, Formic, Yup, Use Mutation, Use Query Client, Use Navigation, and Axios. And our local imports are going to include the following: endpoints, use auth, sign up or sign in screen, theme, row, touchable stars container, and use loading. So let's go create touchable stars container within our components folder. Let's first export our component we're going to have 4 props, and 3 of them are required. Those are going to be stars, field, set stars, and then style is going to be an optional view style. So let's add that as an import. And let's add in some additional imports of view, style sheet, pressable, material, community icons, text, theme, and row. So within our component, we'll have 5 different options of what the star text can be. And next we will create a component which is just going to be a list of stars, and depending upon the stars passed into the component, it will either show a full star or a star outline. And we want these to be pressable. And now for this component itself, we want to return a view, and within a row is where we want to display the stars component, and underneath of that is where we want to display this stars text. Now let's go create the styles for this container, and let's go back to the review screen. Now within the review screen, we need to first see if the user is logged in, and if they aren't, we need to send them to the sign up or sign in screen. Otherwise, we want to show that they can write a review on this screen. So let's add some text saying write a review for the property name, and let's go add some styles for that text. Underneath that, we'll create a format component, and then we will return a fragment within that component. The first component within that fragment will be our touchable stars container, and we'll give that a style of default margin top. And here we're getting this error because we haven't defined our initial values, so let's do that. So in our initial values, we'll have a title, body, and stars. And here we can test out the touchable stars container. Now underneath that, we'll have an input for the title of the review, and then we'll have an input for the body of the review. Now underneath that, we'll have a row with 2 buttons in it, one for canceling and then one for submitting the review. So let's go add some of these different styles. So these different styles will have these different fields, and let's go add in navigation. Now let's create the validation schema. So that will have a required title, body is going to be required, and stars will be required. Now let's create the type that we are going to send to the server. So I'm going to do that here at the bottom of the file. It's going to have user ID, title, body, and stars. And now let's go create a mutation. So for that, we're going to actually need query client and set loading. And then we'll create a mutation called create review. Within the mutation, we're going to want to pass those formic values into it, and then make a post request to our server, passing in those values. Now when this mutates, we're going to set loading to true, and when it's successful, we need to invalidate the queries for the selected property. If it errors out, then we'll alert to the user that we couldn't create the review, and when the mutation is settled, we will set loading to false and call navigation.goBack. Now let's go create the onSubmit function. So that's going to be underneath validation schema, and we are just going to create a review object and then call create review.mutate, passing in that create review object. So this should be done. So let's test it out. So we're going to say that this is a good property. And there we see our review. Let's create another one, and we'll say it's excellent this time. If we click off, the body must be at least 50 characters. And there we go, we have a new average score, and we see that we have 2 separate reviews. So that is it for this one, guys. I hope that you got something out of this, and thank you for watching.